All right, starting webinar. Welcome in, everybody. Welcome in. Hello, everyone. If you don't mind, as you come in, if you could throw in the chat where you're coming in this evening, where you're reporting from, if you will. It'd be great to know. Welcome. Welcome, welcome. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Welcome to Stuart's Opera House. My name is Devin Sudman. We are delighted to be hosting another month of Spoken and Heard. I am the education director here at Stuart's Opera House. Tonight, I am wearing my black hat, a black sweater, and my black rimmed glasses. You know, feeling the gray skies. Stuart's Opera House is committed to our mission. Oh, I'm so sorry. I will make sure that the chat function gets fixed. Let me go ahead and make that. Everyone, I apologize. Go ahead and check to see if the chat is working now, everybody. I will troubleshoot that in just a minute. Yes, the chat is working. Now we can fully get the party started. Stuart's Opera House is committed to our mission to be a regional leader in the arts community, a center for public expression, and an economic development partner for Southeastern Ohio. We acknowledge that our historic theater sits on the traditional homelands of the Shawnee, Adena, and Hopewell peoples. We recognize the ever-present systemic inequities that stem directly from this painful history of colonization and commit ourselves to respecting and reconciling this long history of injustice. Stuart's is committed to being more intentional in the role we play for racial justice. We also commit to being more inclusive of people historically and currently marginalized based on identity, including gender, sexuality, class, and heritage. We wish to publicly express that hate and systemic oppression have no home in our organization. Now for tonight, I will be monitoring the chat that is now working, as well as keeping an eye on the YouTube stream. But for what's most important, I would like to introduce Carrie Gunter Seymour, your host for the evening. Carrie Gunter Seymour is the Poet Laureate of Ohio. Her poetry collections include Alone in the House of My Heart, Ohio University Swallow Press 2022, and A Place So Deep Inside America It Can't Be Seen, Sheila Nagig Editions 2020, and winner of the 2020 Ohio Poet of the Year Award. Her work has been featured on Verse Daily, Cultural Daily, World Literature Today, and the New York Times, and also Poem a Day. A ninth generation Appalachian, she's the editor of I Thought I Heard a Cardinal Sing, Ohio's Appalachian Voices, funded by the Academy of American Poets and the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, and the Women of Appalachia Project's anthology series, Women Speak. Carrie Gunter Seymour is a retired instructor of the E.W. Scripps School of Journalism at Ohio University, an artist in residence at the Wexner Center for the Arts, and a Pillar of Prosperities Fellow for the Foundation for Appalachian Ohio. Please join me in welcoming Carrie Gunter Seymour.
Thank you, Devin.
Yes,
oh my
always so impressed, Carrie. So good to have you.
My goodness, it's a mouthful. I want to thank you, Devin, so much, and all the wonderful folks at Stuart's Opera House for hosting us these many years. And many thanks to all of you for joining us this evening, and for all who will stream our program from Stuart's YouTube page and my personal Facebook page and Twitter pages. available after tonight's event. Also, a special thanks to our ASL interpreters. Tonight, we have Joe and Nico. I always call them magicians of word shapes. And thank you, Devin, for setting up transcriptions as well. Now, you in the audience, you may see us slow down our speaking or even pause between poems to allow our interpreters to catch up. And for our sight impaired guests tonight, I'd like to say I'm a pale-skinned woman with long, straight gray hair. I wear glasses. The rims are tinted navy greenish, and I'm wearing a multicolored quilted top in shades of green and blue, and I'm wearing a hunter green sweater because it is so cold here in southeastern Ohio today. About a week ago, it was 70 degrees. Today, it's in the 30s, and we've had some snow. So this is our third and final event for the fall of 2022, and it's bittersweet. We have with us tonight poet Sandra Rivers Gill, John D. Lee, and Rosemary Watala Trommer. We'll have a short Q&A after the readings. I want you to feel free to type in your questions. You can either put it in the chat window or the Q&A. If you're going to put it in the chat, you probably should do that later so we don't miss it. And now, Sandra Rivers Gill is an award-winning poet, playwright, and performer and native of Toledo, Ohio. She is the editor of Dopeless Hope Fiends, an anthology of poems written by women in recovery, and she is a recipient of an Arts Commission Accelerator Grant. Sandra has received commission work for the Art Box Project and Whitman on the Walls events, both sponsored through the Toledo Arts Commission, as well as commissioned work sponsored by the African American Legacy Project in Toledo. Sandra has served as a teaching artist for her church's drama miniseries, Naomi Incorporated, a treatment facility for women, and Sunset House Senior Life Communities, and as a judge for several poetry competitions. Her work has appeared online and in numerous literary journals. And I've had the pleasure of knowing Sandra through her poetry for several years, and I love hearing her read. Her work with women in recovery is so meaningful to me, and I'm so grateful for it. And it is my great joy to welcome Sandra Rivers Gill to Spoken and Heard.
Hello, Carrie. Thank you so much. That was a lovely, lovely introduction. I really appreciate it. I am blessed and honored to be a part of this Spoken and Heard in this space. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you to Stuart's Opera House for hosting this event or for sponsoring this event. To the lovely sign language interpreters with dancing hands, thank you. And to my fellow readers. A description of me: I have brown skin, brown eyes, dark brown hair. I am wearing a bright pink top. My hair is in an afro, it's pushed back, and I have silver earrings. So with that, I think I'm just going to get started. Thank you so much again for having me in this space. So my first poem is Ain't Nothing Like Family. At the kitchen table, we plant our hips, spread roots deep into the soil. We gather and grow bony plates into country fried chatter. Something good is always cooking, like the gospel of generous dessert, spooning our appetites, heaped all over our hallelujahs. It tests our mettle, stirs up a season of wait, gives us a bold flavor to chew. We ask for second helpings because we thirst for more than pot liquor and cornbread. Family is like leftover stew, hearty as God's honest truth. It's what Mama places on the table. Before prayers rise up, we come together, churned like homemade ice cream. We are a culture of ripened fruit, consuming what is not easy, learning how to appreciate our fullness. Our texture is aromatic spice. On our tongues, we crave living water, well done, like ribs on a summer grill, perfected in the smoke of fire. We are marinated in love, seasoned with the salt of our journey. Okay. The next poem is Drummer. It's actually for my brother who lives in Germany. He is a drummer. He be funk and blues and bebop, scat, drops his shoes and cool. His syncopated beat flows free as pickup sticks, flies over the rim of double-stroked rolls. He got chops. He got solos tapping, a pulse pusher of lightning strikes. His hi-hats be raising the roof of acoustical waves. He is an open mic, a long, distant hallelujah. The next poem has an epigraph after Strawberry Letter 23. Some of you might know the Brothers Johnson. Ruminating. I was sweet 16, a saddened song of summer heat, drifting hello like 8-track melodies from the window of my ears to see his song. The timorousness of it all, the slow dance of kisses, shy on early fruit of lips, to last beyond the magic, the weight of his promises. A waterfall of cherry clouds and love letters I sprayed with love windsong. Our whole notes sparked ballads, entwined our hands into a long duet. The sweetness of music flourishing, a summer fading into a mist, the freedom of flying into the arms of a song that makes no sense until it ends. Watch yourself. My son informs me he was schooled today, almost chalked up like a blackboard lesson. I am reminded my son is a tree bearing the danger of low fruit suspended. History is a class of teachers that mark him absent, but he sees the chariots of fire. My son tells me he does not resist the distant sound of blue night calling him. His answers attempt to soothe the silence and the trick of whirling lights. He is a man, no longer a boy, bound to dim narratives. His truth is a false arrest. The dog tags of discharge hang about his neck. In Galveston, a man's hands are roped, and he is led through town by mounted police. My son tells me his life is a virtual classroom full of routine exams and onlookers passively grade on curves and theories and metaphors that detain a body. Fat meat is greasy. The air in our home spat like fat meat in a cast iron skillet. It was as hot as the R&B hit, "Let's Stay Together," because fast food caters to convenience. Love is supposed to taste better at home. Cooking is what my mother did. Money don't grow on trees, she say. The kitchen is where a family eats. It is where hard conversations remain, where uneaten leftovers are served the next day for breakfast. I remember how a homemade hamburger sat waiting between slices of Wonder Bread. My mother declared the dinner bell had already struck as my father's fire seasoned the kitchen with piss on it, greasing his lips as the front door slammed behind him. My mother's clenched fist stirred across our secondhand table to tenderize his vacancy. His sandwich oozed ketchup, cheese, and tomato like tears. My younger brother and I giggled at the gesture of something we did not understand. The aroma of questions lingered in the air. The thing about being shut, we stay shut in. Open doors shut. Nothing escapes except golden keys. We shut shades, shave our minds, grow skewed hair shut. It matters outside. Shut shutters. The shutting is observable. We whisper, we embrace, we shut words into shape, we unshut words. Say, come inside, but shut access. We shut up cities, shut shopping, online sales, unshut schools. Virtually shut church bells, shut. We learn shut in. We shut carefully taught homes, unshut gyms, shut our bodies, shut into protest. We shut down stretching. Our minds, him, we let go. We shut up still my voices. Hashtags and like, unshut. Shut out seeking, shut handshakes, limit looks, shut up thoughts. We stumble, we sprint, we unshut isms, unshut we whisper, shut it down, beat the streets, shut. We bend our needs into lyrical dirges. Unshut. Seems we are sewn into shut silence. unshut streaming, news, screaming sirens, unshut, shoes, lay unrestrained, hummingbirds, unrhymed, wings shut down, pulsating, unshut songs, bones, raging fire, unshut, our eyes shut, doors shut, windows open, open, open. Okay. This next poem is called At the Fast Food Chain. I am a face in the front line. Base pay is fastened to my name across the chest of my smile. They hire me to take orders, and I am thankful for the 8 hours no one wants to work. Holiday shifts are long, dull days, but quickly raises my bank account, worth the inconvenience. A soundtrack of rain falls with the sun until serenity is interrupted. Prepared for this, I am poised with a friendly welcome. A man steps up to the counter, holds his peace between grip and gaze. There is no menu for his fast fingers and eyes that crave cash and carry. The barrel of his voice aimed in my direction. There is no panic button to push. My smile is a frozen shake of contradiction. His order is not on the menu as I hold up my hands. Give me the damn money. He wants what is in the kitty. I press the register's door, release the dead presidents, give him what is clenched in his jaws. I promptly bag his order. Take from the company's profit, but give good customer service. My life is worth every penny, not to speak to a thief who has no gift to gab. He will call you a bitch for asking him if he wants change. I am going to skip the poem on page 10, Walking. Okay. The next poem I'm going to read is called Pockets. A protected place, not far from reach. The end of arms, a safe home to tuck into, congruently informed, parallel like a parked space, unrestricted and enough to steer clenched hands braced against intense Ohio weather, a rumpled memory, receipts, dollar bills, coins, and a forgotten card bearing a name inside a visible sheath, a pocketed grace in case of detainment. The next poem is perched on the trash of the world. Consider the evidence. Clownfish are stilled by what sparkles on the surface of the sea. No longer is breath spellbound by white cap beauty, swelling in the slow jam of a waltz. Let us pray for the state of global consumption. A tossed salad in the gyre of current bowls. It isn't what Mikey likes, a cereal of displaced dross, heaped on unsettled islands, are the ghost of chefs serving up unsavory gumbo, because soup is a legacy of leftovers, hanging shingles of makeshift bistros. No one said it was five-star dining, but an offer to devour pieces of paradise. Even the birds land on these dives. They talk trash, order from a menu that glitters from a hotbed of want. The next poem has an epigram after Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp went missing. The social. The infrastructure is unreachable. We are not waiters in the rush of traffic, but constantly checking our phones, chiming our minds like Pavlov. We are dogs of theory, licking our own asses, pretending not to smell what is wrong. To be unfazed is to twiddle one's thumbs and press them against the ghost of safeguards. Are we too impatient to soothe our hunger pains? We do not need to gnaw on the same old bone. To supersize is to stretch the truth with bologna. It can never be fried to taste like chicken. We are all cooped up in our own confines, but no one wants to admit it. The digital divide is not the promised land, but aren't we still thirsty? Okay, I'm going to skip over poem on page 15 in the garden. Okay, and I'm going to go to the next poem after that. She sees change. She sees change buried in what is broken. She bends her needs into a prayer, raises coins like Lazarus. Her frugal fingers saves what surrendered to sidewalks, bags a bargain in the basement of her purse, just to balance the budget with a good sale at Ticky's. She teaches her children how to shift, how to make something out of nothing. Okay. Two more poems, and I will be done. Okay. Bon voyage for Fred. We are foreigners, far from understanding each other's translation. Our time zones are separate countries, bordered by unsailed seas. We lack the luxury of frequent flyer miles, conversations not booked. The keepsake of unsaid words is the progression of long distance. A second language greeted us unexpectedly, the love of letting go. Okay, I'm not sure what's going on, if you can still hear me, but I can't get into my Zoom for some reason. Wait a minute.
You're still with us, Sandra.
Okay, all right, okay. I'm gonna read one last poem. And that'll be it. Okay. All right, this last poem is my poetry, and actually this is a spoken word piece. And it's the first one I've ever written, so it's near and dear to me because it tells who I am. Okay. My poetry. I've got the fever for the flavor of my poetry because my words, my thoughts, my vibes have arrived and my rap will come knocking, knocking at your door, ready to greet your consciousness like a special guest coming to stay a while, exchanging smiles and sharing a friendly conversation with harmony. I was given the ability to share a panoramic slice of life as I see it, as I hear it, as I taste it, as I smell it, as I touch it. My poetry has a unique depository placed deep down on the inside of this humble soul by the Holy Spirit that keeps me going. Well, I'm not talking about that Chattanooga choo-choo who's just blowing smoke, but like the little engine that could and did because I think I can. I think I can. I know I can inspire you to admire my poetry and maybe even higher my poetry. My poetry will come singing like bells are ringing on Sunday morning, but you won't find this light snuffed out up under a bushel because my rhythms will be rhyming on time, against time. I might have to ask for some more time, but when I'm off time, that is no time for me to retreat and fall down in defeat because I know when I'm flowing, I might experience a little stage fright, but I'll just holler cut and do another take after the break because my poetry is at stake. I'm a mad poet representing the society, sharing mad styles that are versatile because I am so mad about my poetry as it flexes muscles during some mad aerobics. And I might have to make a mad dash to catch these thoughts because if I don't write them down, the flow will simply go, 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 and no one will ever know about my poetry or my harmony. Because I think I can, I know I can inspire you to admire my poetry and maybe even higher my poetry. I'm just one of many whose God-given talents has been exposed, giving him the glory while telling my own story through my poetry, Floetry. I am a possibility with rhyme ability. I am a smorgasbord of entrees selected from his choice menu. Therefore, I am a splash of love, a dash of salt, and dessert on the side. My poetry is a thought-provoking journey allowing you to kick back and take an auditory round trip, transporting your mind to higher destinations, eastbound, westbound, north, and even southbound. You have your tickets. I hope you enjoyed the ride. Thank you.
Oh my goodness, Sandra, that was so wonderful, as I knew it would be. Thank you so much. And I'll say a little bit about what everybody's been saying in the chat, and that is there's so much music in your work, the cadence, and I think we're all enjoying the repetition. You are the queen of repetition. It's so wonderful. And I particularly love that you've shared with us. I really get the feeling of your sense of place. And when I say that, I mean sort of your culture and your region, you know, where you live in the city and what you do when you're with your people. And, you know, that's my thing too. I love getting together with my people and sharing food and all those things that you do as well, but we all do them a little bit differently. And it's just so wonderful to hear about your family. I did want to make a remark about the poem Watch Yourself. That was so gorgeous. And we know how it is in this country, and we know that racism is rampant and just horrible. And, you know, we've taken many steps backwards. And I thank you for writing poems that can educate us and remind us what it's like to have a son as a woman of color. And I thank you for that, Sandra. And thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Well, after that, we have to move on. And it's always so hard to do, but I'm so happy. John D. Lee is the author of 4 books, including In Desiderato and An Epic of Rumors, How Stories Shape Our Perceptions of Disease. His poems and essays have appeared in The Atlantic, Sugar House Review, Sierra Nevada Review, The Writer's Chronicle 1, The Laurel Review, and The Infectionist Review, to name just a few. He's had an MFA in poetry from Lesley University and a PhD in folklore. He teaches at Suffolk University, where he also serves as a senior poetry reader for Salamander. So I've gotten to know John a bit through his work with the Power of Poetry Festival, which is held here in southeastern Ohio in the beautiful Hocking Hills. I'm sure many of you have heard of that. And it's spearheaded by a friend of ours, Alan Cohen, and his nonprofit Raven Sun. And if you all are interested, you can find information online about the Hocking Hills Power of Poetry Festival. John has an amazing gentleness about him, a stillness, which makes him a standout favorite with his work with young people and emerging poets. And his own work is so achingly beautiful and bold and powerful. And I'm truly honored beyond words to welcome John D. Lee.
Well, my goodness, that was one of the best introductions I have ever had. For all watching this, I am a white man with dark hair, and I'm currently wearing a black shirt, sitting in front of a bookcase full of a whole lot of very fancy books, none of which I have read. So, this is In Desiderato. This is my new book. The title is a Latinate mangling of my own that roughly translates to un/desired, meaning both desired and undesired at the same time. And what I've done in this book is I have taken a series of narratives, spread them apart, taken them apart, and put them in an order where I bounce light and dark, life and death, inside and outside, off of each other to create this overall effect of what I hope ultimately becomes a love letter to my children. The book is dedicated to them. Their names are Juliet and Joshua. It's right inside of the cover. And when I'm going through these poems, they are the you I keep addressing in here, your great-grandfather. That's to my children. So hopefully that will make a little bit of sense as to what it is that you're going to hear in here. I thought it would be useful to start off by taking one of those narrative threads, I call them the grandfather sequences, and putting them back in order so that you can see the grandfather's story. And then I will go from there and read the entirety of section 7. So this is a book-length poem, if that doesn't scare anyone off immediately, but hopefully I'll give you a decent sense of this. Before I go further, thank you, Carrie. Thank you to Joe, the interpreter. I do not envy you the task of trying to figure out how to sign the words that I have so mangled inside of this book. Good luck. So, In Desiderato, the grandfather sequences. The country you were born in stopped the last great worldwide war with 2 bombs that killed more or less 100,000 people each. A loss we justified by saying it prevented further loss. And maybe it did. But it wasn't like the couple 100,000 died at once. Only half did. The rest took a year or so. And now their children's children, and maybe their children too, who would be just as old as you, are gone. This is laughable, of course. They never even lived to be gone. My father's father fought in World War II, saw the bodies line the Battle of the Bulge, and may have helped to put some there. He must have known the smells of toxic gas, the unwashed bodies, heard the bombers' engines echoed in the muddy groans of not yet corpses. He must have known the klaxon wail, the Luger snick, the Granatwerfer mortar thump, the stomach wrench of silence. But he never talked of these. We know he knew the child who dream slept in his Texas wife, who would be there living if he made it home. We know this because we kept his letters, ink and sweat and hope on military-issued yellow paper. But there are gaps between his hope, his terror, because the censors opened every letter, cut out words, phrases, left letters like target practice sheets. He made it back, lived another 40 years, just long enough to see his grandson. And in between, he ran a high school, taught the kids back home what it means to be at war. In the end, cancer cut its holes through lung and liver, left behind a shredded leaden soldier. But the dream-sleep child he waited for lived on, grew, wed, had a son. Your great-grandfather on my mother's side dropped bombs from a B-17 to stop a greater Holocaust. When he got home, he decided that was enough and spent the rest of his life delivering beer for Lucky Lager. You should have seen him. At 60 years old, he could lift the back end of a car off the ground and barrel chest a keg of beer into a fridge. Then, at 62, he got a hernia hoeing garden weeds. And a decade after that, a quadruple bypass. The last time I saw him, he came up to visit me in college, took me to the training grounds where he learned to be a soldier. Only husks of buildings and cracked concrete pads remained, the rest long abandoned and faded into forest. Though he hadn't seen the place in 50 years, he remembered every step, showed me where they slept and ate, where they did their morning push-ups, how over here on this cracked pad, they were taught how to mount a chopper and splint a leg. And over here, where a 10-foot ridge rose 100 yards away, they were taught marksmanship. Every man given a rifle and a magazine and pointed at a cutout of an airplane taped to a pole mounted in the back of a Jeep that drove like hell behind the ridge. How all the soldiers aimed their guns and shot for real at what they knew to be pretend. And then, in the middle of the field, your great-grandfather stooped and ran his fingers through the dirt. And as if he'd known it would be there, dropped the cold ghost of a brass casing in my hand. And what was there to do but stare at the remnants we knew would never go away? The battlefields have healed, of course. Nature threw her skirt across her scars. The grass grew back. The seeds erupted into tree and flower, and the soldier blood that spilled sank into the ground and fed the roots. Omaha and Utah beaches, like any beach, have bikinied tourists who lie on laundered towels and mince across the sea-washed rocks. In the Ardennes, the rubble piles were cleared away and used to build the steeples that point the way to Sunday morning prayer. We've concealed our scars so well that those who've seen the damage are dying. But wreckage has a way of rising. So decades later, a woman planting flowers in her garden unearths an unspent hand grenade, or a city drains a swamp for land and finds the remnants of a tank. And though it doesn't often happen, sometimes what comes crawling back, curled around its splintered bones, is us. All I have that was my father's father's is a toy, a semi-truck that hauls a dozer on a trailer. Grandpa made it, carved it out of wood, even as the cancer carved his lungs. Dad said Grandpa was so clean that when he finished with a handsaw, you could see the pencil lines on both sides of the cut, like they were guidelines showing how the edges fit. So if you took the toy apart, if you matched up all the lines that matched up with each other, if you lined the fibers up like zipper teeth and filled in all the hollows, you'd get a plank of wood. You'd see what Grandpa saw before the blade descended. So those were the grandfather sequences, and I will conclude with the entirety of section 7 of this book. You were push-pulled from the womb, Juliet. Little Gaia, Mary Magdalene, screaming at the cold and light, the feedback loop of hormone and contraction. The hands that gripped and twisted your soft skull and shoulders to a better fit. So much blood whirled, child, in but a second or two, after 22 hours of pushing, grunting, screaming, and then you. And the bright red gush of what once surrounded you streaming into the clear plastic bag between your mother's legs. Seams distended at the weight, conical tip nearly touching the floor. And you, held by the doctor, cord trailing back to where you just were. Blue vein ribbon pulsing, jerking, and the doctor placed one clip, then another, and the cord stopped feeding you the blood. And the doctor handed me the scissors with their pink plastic handles and pointed between the clips and said, "Would you like the honor?" So I took them. I cut you into the world, spurt from the wound, your mother closing her eyes, tired, asking if you were okay, and still more leaking. The clear plastic bag almost full, almost dripping onto the floor. But the doctor towel wrapped you, sent you to be weighed, measured, called for more towels and gauze, and wiped your mother clean, then pulled at the cord, frowned, pulled again, your mother grunting at pressure drugs can't touch, and wrapped the cord figure 8 around index, middle, ring finger, and pulled and pulled and frowned and pulled and called manual extraction to the nurse and pushed in a hand. And your mother's stomach bulged at the intrusion, but the doctor closed his eyes, felt your mother's stomach move like you were still at home, kicking her eyes tight, teeth gritted, brow knit, and the doctor pulled again, and withdrew a fist of blue vein pink mass connected to the cord and dropped it in a stainless steel pan, sent it to the lab and the cord blood bank. And you, still eyes tight, screaming on the scales, but the doctor said, "I think that's all." Then saw the fissures left by your exit and had the nurse bring black thread and curved needle and sewed your mother's wound shut, just 6 small stitches. Your mother past the point of feeling, responding, knowing, and stripped his glove from his hand and shook my hand up, down, and left the nurses to gather and place a pink plastic bucket beneath the end of the clear plastic bag to cut the tip, drain its contents, hand you to me as we watched the bucket fill, the room empty one by one, the metal instruments, the cotton wadding and latex gloves placed in separate containers, wheeled out on carts, sent to trash, incinerator, autoclave, until just your mother and you and I were left to consider what was done and stare at each other, the room so still, so still, so still. As the Arctic permafrost and peat bogs warm, the thousands of tons of methane trapped since the last ice age will rise and warm the sky. As the atmosphere warms, the water will be sucked from seas and lakes, and the rising vapor will hold the heat and warm the air. As the rainforests warm and dry, and so too as the fires burn the mountains, the trees will topple and rot and release their tons of CO2. As the ice melts in the glaciers and at the poles, the seas will rise and lick away the land, and the heat that ice otherwise reflects will absorb into the seas. As the seas warm, the 1,000-year currents that mix the then and the now will cease to stir the world. When I was young and hungry, my mother took her cast iron skillet off the shelf and heated it on the wood-burning stove and let the flavors of everything it ever cooked seep from its pores. Yesterday's onions, last week's bacon, 100 fried eggs, the gravy from Thanksgiving when grandfather gave me a secret sip of beer, cinnamon and apples and cloves for pies, peppered chicken breast, salted ribeye steak. And into this, she poured a simple can of beans, stirred them with a wooden spoon until they bubbled, then brought the skillet to the table and poured it on my plate. And I scooped the beans up steaming, the liquid dripping from my chin and staining my clothes. And Mom smiled and wiped the skillet with a paper towel and ran her knuckles through my hair. At the edge of what is known, a fringe of scholars who have spent entire lives examining the carbon isotopes the 100,000-year-old bubbles trapped in ice, the waste that comes from burning oil and all the oil not drilled still left to burn, the meltwater pulse that gashes ice and shore, the colony collapse of pollinating bees, the disappearance of the nuanced biome, and the accelerating decimation of all that lives but us, have concluded that the human race may have as little as 300 years remaining, that the point at which we needed to react might have been before we even knew there was a problem. I do not know if they are right, but I know the garbage pits and mines, the rifled barrels pointed at our fathers' fathers, the animals that choke in plastic heaps, the dead spaces that line the seas and cities. 2 days after you were born, we swaddled you in a sleeping sack, buckled you in a car seat, packed up the bottles, blankets, face cloths, diapers, nipple shields, and took the elevator to the parking lot. 2 blocks down, a man walked out of a convenience store and scratched his lottery tickets, threw them on the sidewalk as they failed him one by one. But past the homeless begging for food, the oil-slick waste pond in the construction yard, the miles of highway shoulders strewn with coffee cups and beer cans, we turned into a driveway clogged with last year's leaves and acorns, and handed you exhausted to your mother's mother, who shushed you in our green leather chair, who let you drool and spit up on her shoulder and weigh her arms until her hands slept. All along the western coast of the continent where you and your mother and brother and I were born, ballets of Clark's nutcrackers fill the skies and branches with shocks of black and white feathers. They line the summer air with their craw, craw, and their guttural mating croak, and the hammer of their beaks on pine cones to rip out the seeds, to store them in dozens beneath their tongues, to carry away and hide and bury in stashes. As many as 50,000 seeds per bird, placed here and there along the coast and mountain slope, and almost all of them remembered, even 9 months later, so that when the snow has cloaked the ground and the evergreen branch, the nutcracker can survive. And the few seeds it doesn't remember will crack their husks in spring and send a feeder root in search of soil. We have had such little time together that I barely know your voice. My mother's mother died in her sleep at 91, only dimly aware that you had been conceived. My father's mother died this morning at 92, never having held you. I cannot imagine how they watched their men go off to war, watched the mail for news, and then took care of them when they returned. These men who drank and smoked and died too soon. And when they died, how the women went back home and changed the sheets, and how the sun rose in the morning anyway, and how their stomachs growled, and how the years passed. I wish that you had met them. There is so little now but words. Thank you.
Marcy. I can barely speak. John, thank you. That was just amazing. I was trying to take notes and then I just couldn't anymore because I was so enraptured. But I love this concept of writing this book of history for your children. And first of all, what a wonderful, loving thing to do. And I'm thinking about them being able to hold this in their hands, and your grandchildren and your greats, long after you're gone, this book will remain. And I just the idea of that is just so beautiful to me, that concept. And I loved, well, first of all, your work is so visceral and so visual, and you can see every little detail. You're just so gifted. And I say gifted because I know you work hard. I don't mean you don't work hard for it, but my gosh, are you good at it? And I love the way, instead of, when I talk about my grandparents, I say my grandparents, but you say my mother's mother or my father's mother, and I find that just so wonderful. And you just, I wrote down a couple of things that you said that just, like nature threw her skirt across the grass. When you're talking about the ground healing from war, and that juxtaposition of war, and then this female skirt, just kind of, coming in to heal the land. And anyway, I could go on, and there's a bunch of stuff in the chat, and I know everyone at home in here is thinking the same thing I am. But thank you so very much for sharing your beautiful work with us tonight. Everybody get this book. I'm going to just go right ahead now and put that back in the chat again for you all so you can order it. This from Jacquard Press out of North Carolina. It's a wonderful small press, and we need to support the folks there too as well. So thank you, John, so very much for joining us this evening, and we'll talk more with you later. Okay, we still have one more poet. This is kind of amazing. Rosemary Watala Trommer co-hosts Emerging Form, a podcast on creative process. Also, Secret Agents of Change, a Serapis Kindness Cabal, and Soul Writers Circle. Her poetry has appeared on a Prairie Home Companion, PBS NewsHour, in O Magazine, Rattle, American Life in Poetry, and her daily poetry blog, 100 Falling Veils. Her most recent collection, Hush, won the Halcon Prize, and Naked for Tea was a finalist for the Able Muse Book Award. Her one-word mantra is adjust. I met Rosemary many years ago, again at the Power of Poetry Festival, and it was at a time when I was not even sure I was a poet yet. And Rosemary has been such an inspiration to me and so many emerging and established poets and all in between. She's also amazing with young people. And I'm so in awe of the fact that her writing practice is to create a poem every day. And every day you'll find that one new daily poem, and maybe more, on her blog, which I mentioned earlier, 100 Falling Veils. And if you have not heard her yet, because she does way more than read, be prepared to be enchanted. Please welcome Rosemary Traumer.
Thank you, Carrie. Not to make loss beautiful, but to make loss the place where beauty starts, where the heart understands for the first time the nature of its journey. Not to make loss beautiful, but to make loss the place where beauty starts, where the heart understands for the first time the nature of its journey. I wanted to start, those are the words of Gregory Orr. And I wanted to start with those words because I feel like they have been so helpful to me in the last year. And I know that many of us have experienced in the last several years enormous losses. And what Gregory Orr's words promise us is that there is also this possibility for incredible grace. And so when I thought about which poems I wanted to put together for this evening, I chose poems that touch on loss. I've had several large losses of my own in the last year and a half. My son took his life. My father died of kidney failure. And at the same time, I've experienced this enormous rush of love and grace. And so it is that the loss is not beautiful, but it is the place where beauty starts. And I wanted to somehow bring that very complex, paradoxical, beautiful, terrible mix to the poems tonight. So a program, I guess, on grief and incredible grace and gratefulness. I am a 53-year-old woman. I have pale skin, long dark hair. It's straight. There's some gray in it. I don't wear glasses, and I'm sitting in front of a bookshelf full of many, 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 many poetry books and a bright green wall. And I want to thank Joe so much for bringing these poems to life in their body and their face. Thank you, Joe. So I'm going to start with a poem that I wrote almost exactly a year ago. And this is a poem that I wrote when I was in Georgia visiting my mother. It was her birthday. She was turning 75. And my father was dying at the same time. And this song begins with an epigraph from Marcus Aurelius, the Roman general. He says, "What we do now echoes into eternity." This poem is called "Gonna Rise Up Singing." If what we do now echoes into eternity, then let there be more mornings, such as this one, in which my mother wakes me by singing a thin thread of melody that praises the beauty of the day. By breakfast, I feel the small reverberations of her joy as they ricochet in me, chiming against loss and fear. An unabashed gladness that rings against the holy ribs, that spirals inside the aortal caves, that peels through the chasms of the hours. By afternoon, it's coruscating, resonating, a bit of aural shine against the day's ache, helping me meet the world a bit more brightly. Think, after an eternity, how much beauty might have come from one simple tune, sung by one open heart, willing to sing for one moment what is true. Gosh, I think about this all the time, about how it takes so little kindness, such a small seed, to grow into something astonishing. It's a reason to plant as much beauty as we can imagine. And it matters. It matters. I loved in John's poem when he said about his daughter, I cut you into the world. And I feel in many ways that that the grief, bearing the grief of the death of a child, is in many ways very much like a birth, a new birth. In fact, well, I'll just read the poem. Condition. My body. Thank you for carrying this ache, for carrying it not like a burden, but like a baby, like a gift, like something that will change you and keep changing you forever. Of course, you would want to shut down, to close, to contract, but I see how the grief grows you, though it shreds your sleep, though it drops you to the floor. You learn what it is to be a mother. Through no effort of your own, you are on board for a miracle. So big, this invitation to love. Oh, body. You would never ask for this. And yet, you meet grief every moment. You find inner doors you never knew were there. And you swing them open, not to rid yourself of the ache, but to grant it full access, to know the grief completely, to let it rewrite you, remake you, rebirth you, to let grief teach you what it means to be alive. Hey, Joe, I can only see you just a little bit out of the corner of my eye, and it is such a joy. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is the prayers. And when I was, maybe 15 years ago, and I was having a very difficult time in my life, I had this prayer very similar to what Sandra said at the end of one of her poems. She ended the poem with open, open, open. And my prayer at this time was, open me. This poem is called The Prayers. When I asked the world to open me, I did not know the price. When I wrote that 2-word prayer in the sand, I did not know loss was the key, devastation the hinge. Trust was the dissolution of the idea of a door. When I asked the world to open me, I could never have said yes to what came next. Perhaps I imagined the waves knew only how to carry me. I did not imagine they would also pull me under. When I asked the world to open me, I had not imagined drowning was the way to reach the shore. The waves of sorrow dragged me down with their tides of unthinkable loss. The currents emptied my pockets and stripped me of my ideas. I was rolled and eroded and washed up on the sand like driftwood, softened. I sprawled there and wept, astonished to still be alive. It is not easy to continue to pray this way. Open me. And yet, it is the truest prayer I know. The other truest prayer, though sometimes it frightens me, is thank you. Oh, you know, I've had lots of reasons to think about brokenness and how my ideas about brokenness have changed so much. I really used to believe, I think, in fixing and what is it John said? Wreckage has a way of rising. But wreckage, well, I'll let the poem speak. What's in a broken cup? Not everything broken need be fixed. Even the loveliest cup, the one that seemed perfection, the one that fit just right in the hand and held the favorite wine, even that cup is only a cup. And being fashioned out of breakable clay, it was, we could say, made to be broken. The fact it was fragile was always a part of its value. In shattered fragments, the cup is no less treasured, perhaps even more treasured now that its wholeness is not taken for granted. There are some who would throw the pieces away. There are some who would meet them with glue or even with gold in an effort to repair. But there are some who will cherish what is broken, hold it even more tenderly now, trusting its use, though different, is no less valuable. Trusting a fragment is sometimes more than enough. Trusting we might now sip our wine straight from the source. The next poem, I'm going to start with a song that comes from Finland. I lived there for a year and had the pleasure of singing with the Finnish National Youth Choir. And this was one of the songs that we learned. Its lyrics are by Leevi Madetoja. Good job, Joe. And rather the lyrics and the music is by Leevi Madetoja. And the lyrics are by Veikko Koskaniemi. Finnish names are not easy. So since the song is in Finnish, I'll give you just a very bare translation. It's something like this. Look at all the waves on the water as they move, all of them breaking into one another. And they arrive at the ocean and become one big water. And this is like the soul on its journey, rolling in the current with all the other waves and not asking how. The poem's called All is Water, and it has an epigraph, One river gives its journey to the next, by Alberto Rios. Katson vieran kalvohon, kaikki kato sieltä. Alto solisten, uuden alon tieltä. On kuin sielu sulhen, utuiskulkuinen. Viran kerran viris pois, kusumättä kunne. I thought it was I giving the journey to you. You gave the journey to me. I thought I was the headwaters, but I have become your tributary. Now, I carry your turbulence, I carry your calm. I carry the waters of my own breaking. A river follows the same changing course, but the water moving through is always new. Let's name this river the river of sorrows. Let's name it the river of love. New. Is it any wonder I am startled by this journey? Old. Is it still any wonder I am longing to give? Traveling these shores, there are moments when I feel every other wave that has ever passed, and feel every wave that will ever be, and know myself a share of something greater, something generous that is always giving, something ever borrowing from the current of the world. On kuin cielo sulhen, utuiskulkune viran kerran viris pois. Usumättä kunne. Thanks. There's something astonishing I didn't know about grief. Oh, for you who know me, you knew there was very little chance of me getting through this program without crying. What I did not know was how much love could show up from strangers, from friends. I have been so grateful for the love that has carried me. To everyone who has supported me this year. Let's say we gathered on the street tomorrow. And let's say we met in Kazakhstan on a windy day near the Caspian shore, then I would say to you, as the Kazakhs do, I see the sun on your back. It means thank you for being you. It means I am alive because of your help. Then I would hug you and probably cry because it is everything what you have done for me. And as you walk away, I would marvel at the radiance beaming from between your shoulders, shining down your spine. It has been so dark, and oh, how you have carried me with your light. Ah, well, it's not surprising that it's the poem about gratitude that would make me fall apart. Before I read my last poem, I want to thank Carrie. Thank you, Carrie. What a beautiful offering. I want to thank Stuart. What an amazing program. Thank you. I want to thank Joe. I want to thank Nico, our interpreters tonight. I want to thank Sandra and John and every one of you who showed up. And I want to thank all the people who honestly have supported me in the last year and a half and made it possible for me to be here. And I'm going to close with this poem. Oh. Watching my friend pretend her heart isn't breaking. On Earth, just 1 teaspoon of neutron star would weigh 6 billion tons. 6 billion tons equals the collective weight of every animal on Earth, including the insects, times 3. 6 billion tons sounds impossible until I consider what it is to swallow grief. Just 1 teaspoon, and one may as well have consumed a neutron star. How dense it is. How it carries inside it the memory of collapse. How difficult it is to move then. How impossible to believe anything could ever lift that weight. There are many reasons to treat each other with great tenderness. One is the sheer miracle that we are together on a planet surrounded by dying stars. Another, none of us can see what anyone else has swallowed. And thank you. Thank you.
Rosemary, I hope you know you are loved so much, so much. And I really just, I'm not going to go on and on because I know you're having a bit of a time tonight, so I don't want to add to it all. But I do want to say, as always, I thank you so much for all of your so many gorgeous affirmations. You always bring that with you. Telling us to let grief teach us how to be alive, and to let it rewrite us. And I really think those are just words to live by. And thank you for giving those to us tonight, and that we can move forward with that in our hearts, because it has been hard for a lot of folks. And I don't mean to diminish yours, because I think yours is the hardest. But But you've always been so giving, and the fact that you're still able to is just nothing short of a miracle. And I thank you so much for it, Rosemary. And thank you for being here tonight. And so I thought what we might do now is we could all turn on our videos and we'll just have a little chat. And if anybody in the audience would like to either put a question in the chat or in the question window. I'm trying to get things open here so I can see better. I start out with a few questions, but if y'all have any, you are welcome. I want to put these books into the chat again for all of you. In Desiderato is from Jacquard Press. Hush from Middle Creek Publishing. Sandra's website is sandrariversgill.com. I have my own book up there because my publisher will be mad if I don't. So it's Alone in the House of My Heart from Ohio University Press, which I'm very pleased and happy to have them as my publisher. They've been just wonderful. So while we're waiting to see if anybody else has any questions, I have questions. And everybody's talking about how beautiful the work has been tonight and how much they love it. So, Sandra, I'll start with you because I thought maybe you could tell us all about your work with women in recovery, and as much as you are willing or not, because I know there's a bit of confidentiality there as well. But I know you've been deeply involved, and I honor that so highly. So I was hoping you might share some of your experience. Oh, we need you to turn on your mic, Sandra.
There we go. All right. I have served the women of this treatment facility for a number of years. I served on the board, for one thing, and I wanted to, I'll just say Naomi, it's Naomi Inc. At the time, they were looking for a poetry teacher, and I was asked to find someone at the university or somewhere. And, but I, waited a little while, and then I got this little tap on my shoulders, like, you do it, the Spirit drops things on you yourself. And I'm thinking, well, I don't have the background to teach these women. I don't have, I start playing these negative words in your head. So I told the executive director that, yeah, I will do it, not knowing what to be in for or anything. But I found it to be so rewarding. These women, I would go in every week, and these women would be so hungry for a word, and I started with prompts and themes, and they were ready to write what they knew, basically from their own experiences. And I loved it. They loved it. And that's, it was a beautiful experience. So rewarding, not only to me, but to them as well. And, cried at the table and, shared these different stories. And, it was beautiful. It was a beautiful experience.
Thank you for that, Sandra. I was hoping that's exactly what you would say, and I think it's so wonderful because it's real easy to get labeled in this world, and it's harder to build up self-esteem of someone who's been labeled in a very negative way, and so that's God's work, I think.
It is very much so. A lot of the women, some of them had graduated from high school, some had not, and some were a little, timid to put their information out there, but it was a safe environment for them to do so. I shared about myself, and they shared, and they were really forthcoming in sharing, their past, and it was more therapeutic for them, to be able to write down, their thoughts, their expressions, their highs and lows, everything, you know. And when I went in, it was with the idea that once the group had finished their program, which was up to 12 months, I would take their words and put them into a book. And so that's what I did. It was a compilation of several years, after waiting for them to graduate and then putting it in a book. So they were really proud of that. And we had a book reading of that. And some of them came back to read. And it was really beautiful. It was beautiful. Yeah. It was really touching just to listen to their words. I work with them and putting their poems together and editing things. But once it was published and then had to read that over again, it was just really just very emotional, just to hear them, hear the words replayed again. So it was just beautiful, beautiful experience. I'm glad I was part of that.
I'm glad you were too, Sandra. Rosemary, I thought maybe you could tell, I know people are always so interested in writing process, and I have a writing process question for John as well. But I think we'd all love to know how it is you get yourself to write a poem every day. And I know you get asked this a lot, but I do think everyone here tonight is scratching their heads saying she writes a poem every day and actually puts it up on her. And you do. I happen to know you do that. So I thought maybe you could just kind of share maybe how your brain works or how this all comes about.
Yeah, I mean, it started for me as a almost like a dare, can you do it for 30 days? Which at the time sounded impossible. I didn't think that there was any way I could write a poem every day for 30 days. But for me, in terms of the process and how it's evolved over time, I think the sweetness is that I have come to really trust that absolutely everything offers itself, as Mary Oliver says, everything offers itself to your attention. And there is nothing not worthy of a poem. I remember, this was long before I was writing daily poems, and David Lee, who is here tonight, I remember being in a classroom with him, and he came up with 3 words. One of them was doorknob. I remember him just kind of writing a poem impromptuously on the board that included the word doorknob. He had 3 words, and and I thought, really, that's possible? You can write a poem about a doorknob? Yes, you can. In fact, you can write a poem about absolutely everything. And I think that that there's a couple of ideas I have. One is just to lower your standards. It's a famous line from oh, good grief, it just flew out of my head. Oh, come back.
Stafford.
Thank you, William Stafford. Thank you very much for saving me, John. And it's true, that having a daily writing practice, especially one that you're going to put out into the world, you really do need to completely let go of any perfectionist inclinations that you have. And then the other thing is this beautiful question that I bring to almost everything I come into contact now is, what do you have to teach me? And that question has transformed my writing practice, but more than that, it has transformed everything about the way I meet the world off the page.
Wow. That's inspiring, Rosemary. Truly. Thank you. And John, I was curious about your research because you go pretty back pretty far in your family. And I just wondered, was it a matter of speaking to your father? As Rosemary said, your father's here tonight and he's wonderful, wonderful human being. Or did you, get online and do some research at ancestry.com? I mean, can you just give us a little insight? Or is this something maybe your family actually shares these stories from generation to generation? So I would be very interested, and I think our listeners would be as well.
So I certainly grew up hearing quite a number of these stories, and met all four of my grandparents. Dad's dad died when I was, I think, 7 or 8. I have very few memories of him. But my mother's father died when I was a freshman in college, and so I have very distinct memories of him. And both of the grandmothers were alive this millennium. So I met all of them and spent a long time, of course, listening to their stories and taking notes on this one, but still had to go back when I was trying to figure out how to write these sections and ask mom and ask dad, was this what actually happened, or am I misremembering this? How did this actually work? And to their credit, one of the loveliest responses was, write it how you think it should poetically sound, and we'll tell you if it's wrong enough that you need to change something about it. But if it's okay and it sounds great, then we'll deal with that. So I think he actually got his hernia at 62, mom's dad. But if he didn't, then it was close enough to that age that we're not going to worry about it too much. So it was a lot of research. I mean, the entire book was a lot of research into various aspects of science and geology and nature and family history and war. And I had 40 or 50 tabs open on Firefox at any given time, for example, on what it is that I was going to research. And then a constant line to mom and dad about family history and bits of this and that.
Wow. Well, I mean, it shows. I mean, it's just so thorough. It's so, as I said, so visual, so visceral. And I love the work. And I'm so taken by the fact that now your kids are not going to have to do that. You've done that work for them, which is really amazing when I think about it. Do you all have questions for each other? You've heard each other read, or you might have a question for each other if you'd care to do that. Or, oh yeah, Rosemary does.
Yeah, sure. I have a question. We're actually for both of you. Just how much is music and sound a part of your initial process? Does it come in right away, or is it something you add later? Or how much is your ear involved in your writing?
Okay, I'll address that. I think music for me just comes naturally, just comes right in. I may have a thought about something, and then I'll think about, the senses. I'll include something that I'm able to touch, or maybe the reader can touch or see or feel, and add that in. A lot of my poems have some internal rhyme to them. I don't always write with the rhymes at the end. Sometimes I do, but most of the times I don't. So it's mostly free verse. And I love the way a poem would just flow, kind of like a song, a literal song. And I know I like hearing the alliterations. I love hearing the echoing and the repeating and all of that. And just it's I don't know, soothing to me. It's something familiar about it, and just feels natural. I always grew up in a musical family. We were coming up, my mom would play music in the house, and no matter what, every Saturday morning it was something. She played everything. It was show tunes, it was jazz, it was gospel, it was R&B, it was everything. And so my brother and I would just learn these songs. And I remember what Dizzy Gillespie would play, Salt Peanuts, and we would just sing that around the house. I mean, it was on fire. It got the house clean, and, but I just love music. My mom was she's still living, but she used to sing in the choir and mezzo soprano and things like that. And so that's in me. Music is in me. Mm-hmm. So when I write, I want to write it in a way that I heard it. And so I incorporate those nuances.
Yeah, I hear it. I hear it in your reading.
Thank you.
For sure.
Thank you.
John, how about you? You have such a fabulous language. Your language is so visceral and almost ridiculously so sometimes.
Thank you. When you grow up in a house with a poet who is also a Milton scholar and reads Shakespeare and John Donne and quotes quite a lot of that on a regular basis, I had several sentences memorized when I was 5, probably, and so the music has always been there. But to your question, the music, not in like a radio sense, but in terms of the meter, the alliteration, the assonance, is
That's what I mean.
always there. That's where we get to like the very first part of anything is how does this sound and how does it feel on the mouth? And if it doesn't feel or sound right, then that's not the right thing to put there. And I don't know what the right thing is, but if it's clunky, but it's not supposed to be clunky, then I have to go out and figure out something else. And I find that I think quite a lot in iambics or trochaics, and it's just stress on stress, stress on stress, stress on stress over and over and over again. And it's almost in some ways difficult for me to write a poem without slipping into iambics because I've been doing it for so long that it just comes natural, but wreckage has a way of rising and it just kind of flows like that internally, and luckily so, I guess, because it makes it a little bit easier. I don't have to focus quite so much on the sound as opposed to people I've worked with who can't hear the stresses and unstresses, and it's difficult to get them to that point because I think that's one of the key components of poetry is being able to hear how those stresses and unstresses sound. Luckily it's there, and so it's always there. Even sometimes when I'm talking to someone, I'll step back and hear my voice, and I can hear myself speaking in vague iambics or something and think, oh, that was an interesting sentence. How did I do that?
Oh, I love it. I love it. I love these little talks that we do afterwards. Hey, to y'all, it's the season of giving. No matter how you celebrate, it's always fun to give gifts, whether it be during November, December, or going into January, February, which are the really awful months when getting a gift of a book is such a wonderful thing to receive in the mail. So I wondered if you each might want to consider sharing a one or two of your favorite poets, so that others might be able to investigate them. I know that's a hard question because we all love so many. So maybe what's your current favorite? Oh, what do we have there? Oh, you're gonna have to.
This is Dad's newest book, Rusty Barbed Wire. I'll plug my own father if that's acceptable. This is his selected poems. Well worth see. Rosemary's got one too.
I do too.
Anybody?
Yeah, I have one too, and it is marvelous. So you're right. It's an excellent, excellent choice. Anybody else?
Okay, I have one that is not a book of poems per se. It's not sold as a book of poems, but it's the Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows.
Oh,
Wow.
It is phenomenal. It's all the words that you wish were in our language that are not. And the book itself, it's a black cover with gold lettering, and it feels like a gift when you hold it and you open it up. And for anyone who is a word lover, all of the words are carefully crafted out of words from other languages, so they make some sort of linguistic sense. And it's an incredible joy to read that book.
thank you. Wonderful. I think there's a question here. Okay. When you write about something that is deeply personal, is there a line that you have to set and will not cross? And that's open to you all. You want me to read it again?
Sure.
When you write about something that is deeply personal, which obviously you all did, is there a line that you have to set and will not cross?
I'll say that for the birth sequences in Desiderado, I had to have a lot of talks with my wife to make sure that she was comfortable with what I was saying about her nether regions, and had to edit out a few things. So yeah, not a good idea to cross those lines, I suppose.
I see my friend Stephen Concert is here as one of the attendees tonight. And Stephen had a t-shirt that all of us wore one weekend in Utah at a poetry conference. And it said, "Careful what you say or you'll end up in my poem." And, you know, I love, John, that you were so considerate of your wife. I am not always so considerate, and but what are the lines I wouldn't cross if I were going to hurt someone? I would never do that.
Yeah, I think he's asking, when you start to dive deep,
Yeah.
do you have a point where you say, okay, wait, this is it. I can't go any further. I will destroy myself if I do, or something like that, is I think what he's asking is, do you consciously set yourself a stopping point, or do you just let yourself go?
I think, you know, it's a very different question for writing a poem and sharing a poem. And
Yes, that's insightful.
mhm. It is true that you will meet a place where it is not safe. I think that's true.
Mhm.
And the body will stop. I know, I don't think I set that line, but I know that I can trust that I have some, it's like the emotional governor that's like, no, you don't get to go past this point. Which doesn't mean you never will. It just means it's not ripe now.
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree with that, Rosemary. I don't think I've come to a point where I have crossed that line at all. There are some poems that I do have that I've not shared, that are not quite done. And I have to figure out a way of writing them so that I'm careful to respect, whoever the individual is in the story of the poem. But there might have been one or two poems that I've read that I previously shared with my mom, that she was in the poem, and she, it was okay with her. And as I read it, she teared up and she remembered exactly the way I remember, certain aspects, of the past. And it's like, it was okay for me to share that. So sometimes I guess you have to ask permission, but I don't think I have any poems that are so, well, I don't know. I haven't gotten to that point yet. When I do, I think I will possibly ask, whoever is in that poem, is it okay for me to share it?
Okay, we have one more question. I hope I'm keeping you till the 9 o'clock hour, it would seem. Oh, I have two more questions if we have time. This person wants to know, what is the next project for you all? Do you have new books coming up, or travel, or maybe fine art instead of the written word? What's up for y'all?
Okay. I have a couple of manuscripts that are out there already. I didn't want to share their name because they are still being considered, but I'm working on a group of poetry for my grandmother. Each person in my family is going to get a book. I'm writing, poems about them. But my grandmother, she was 100 years old. She died about 7 years ago. And she began writing her own story about her life. And so I would sit there and write these stories down. And then she had a stroke, and then she would repeat everything. So I have enough of the stories that I'd like to put them into, compile them into a collection poetically, and haven't really decided what what type of poetry. I don't know. It might be prose poetry, because I'm sort of gravitating toward that, and I love that form. So that would be, a couple of collections I'm working on.
John or Rosemary, anything?
I have a new book coming out in April. It's called All the Honey.
Ooh.
And it's a collection, maybe a little bit like the poems I read. Some of the poems I read tonight are in it. And it's very much a book that touches on both deep grief and the incredible joy of being alive. So it's both. And then I also have a book of 3-line poems that will come out. And I'm deeply in love with what 3-line poems can do. And it'll be a kind of a day book. And I'm pretty excited about that too.
As you should be. What about you, John?
So at the moment, Indesiderado is almost exactly a year old at this point, and I don't have any manuscripts even submitted because I'm still working on getting this one out and doing all of that. But the follow-up manuscript is completely done. I could have actually sent it to a publisher this time last year, and the manuscript after that is about 3/4 done. So I'm constantly writing, and we'll just have to see when I feel like anything, like the world needs a new book from me. But there's lots of stuff in the chamber, as it were. Lots of projects out there.
I like hearing that. I'm so glad to hear that. Well, and then we've had so many comments about how much everyone has enjoyed the program this evening, and all of you. One person says, each poet has stirred my emotions in special ways for which I hardly have words, which is just a really beautiful thing to say. So with that, I'm going to bid you all adieu. Thank you all so much, Rosemary, Sandra, John, for joining me, our audience, our amazing audience. I do want to say that I look forward to seeing everyone for our next season, which is, of course, spring. And that seems a very far time away, but really it'll go quickly. And I'll be hosting amazing folks such as Hanif Adurquib, James Cruz, Wandra Chang, George Belgier, and many others. And that information will go up soon. I, of course, want to thank everyone who came out tonight to spend the evening with us and all who will stream later. Of course, thank you to Devin and our ASL interpreters and all the great folks at Stuart's Opera House for hosting our events. I want y'all to have a happy and safe seasonal celebration time. And I'll just say good night.
Good night. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sandra.